growing very much. And this is from all the competing companies that are putting these LLMs to the market. They are coming from different angles, and we will just we want to get a better understanding what strategies we can take there and which one are suited for coding. And when it comes to that, there is a variety of LLMs that are out there, and these are the ones that I use, for example. So you probably heard about Gemini from Google. They just released the 2.5 Pro version and 2.5 Flash version. The Flash version is known to be faster, not so heavy. Therefore, also the quality can lag a little bit in comparison to the 2.5 Pro. But anyhow, it's a very mighty LLM. The same counts for the ChatGPT models. It's a bit confusing what versions are out there. The 2.5, the 4.5 is, I think, sort of one state-of-the-art model. The 4.1 is sort of suited more, or like tailored a little bit more for coding. So on and so forth. I think in the meanwhile, they also have the O4 at the moment, which is also very strong. Claude from Anthropic, that's my favorite. We'll come to that. Is just very strong with coding. Not so much in this chatting framework. I mean, these former two, the Gemini and ChatGPT, you know them from like this chatting platform. Claude is really, when it comes to, this is why I also like, when it comes to production and like getting summaries of large text and writing good code quality, this is where Claude really shines. And then we have DeepSeek, which is a sort of in this row, the first open source model and open weights model. You also know that, and then we have Mistral and Destra from Mistral, which are also open source and open weight models. That's the only European competitor here coming. I think Mistral is situated in France, somewhere, probably in Paris. They are also not too bad. And this might definitely be an option for us as well. And how can you integrate AI in your coding workflow? So normally, like 2 years ago, you would just like take your function that you defined in your Python script, and then you would paste it to this chat interface, and then ask the AI, improve this function. Nowadays, you wouldn't do that anymore because there's more clever strategies to do that. One other option is use code completion. As you might know it from the Copilot interface in VS Code or in Cursor, Windsurf, they have these code completions which are quite strong and they have their advantages, but it's not suited for, it doesn't sort of make profit in the broad sense. It's really just for when you're writing code and you want to be a bit faster.
Fabian, on that code completion thing, do you also find that it's more distracting? And can you switch it off?
Yeah, of course. Oh, you can always switch it off. And this is actually what I did as well on my end, because I find it also a bit confusing. And sometimes you have this short buffer where you sort of your fingers are not there what you want to write, and then it shows the suggestion, and then the suggestion actually confuses with what you originally thought, and this sort of kind of distracts you, and you're also getting into this mood of being lazy and actually not thinking, and you just write def space, and then, oh yeah, that's a nice suggestion, let's take that. Yeah, it sometimes leads you towards implementations that you perhaps wouldn't be doing otherwise. But there's some advantages. I can see that as well. There's this inline interface where you are in your chat, and perhaps I can just show that. Let me open VS Code a little bit here. I hope that's large enough. And for example, if I now enter, I think it is. It's been a while. I didn't use that. This chat, is it? Yeah, it's Control I, and then you could ask ChatGPT or Copilot in this case, what is this function? and then it would give you an answer about this, or an explanation about your code that you probably have to mark. I think, or select. This didn't work probably because I didn't select the function. It's something like this, but you know the principle. Now I could ask it what this function is doing. There's some advantages, but all these tools are more sort of interactively applicable within your editor. And then the last point that I wrote down here, which is the agentic workflows. And this is where we want to go in this presentation. And what is agentic workflows? This is something that we want to go through. Agentic coding, or an agentic workflow, is a rather automized framework driven by you being sort of a partner, or on the same level as the AI, which sits in your terminal, mostly in your terminal. There is also these chat interfaces, as you would know from Copilot or others, but mainly the idea is you set up a task for the LLM, and the LLM will break down this task into several steps and then perform the task and report back. So what would it do? First, it would try to understand the task you're giving it. Then it would plan and make a strategy for tackling the task. And for that, it would also look into your code bases, try to get the context it needs. And then in the third step, it would run an autonomous execution of all the changes that are required in order to do that task. And this is sort of the magic that's happening, right? This is where really the stuff gets done. And you would see the LLM being interactively executing and changing your code bases. And then in the fourth step, there would be a validation and refinement. And finally, in the final step, it would report back to you what it has done. And with this workflow, and you can think of these steps being quite a small task, but it could also be a very large, complex task that's happening. But with this workflow, this LLM interaction with your code bases is quite stable. And we see that with tools like Claude Code. And why is that? The LLM, this is on the right-hand side, the LLM can use during this workflow tools for its own, within its own context window, that helps the tool that helps the LLM to understand and to change or make edits to your code. It can also be tailored by you as you give it the context, and there is a thing called context files. I will go into that a little bit deeper. But these are also quite essential in order to tailor the LLM towards your needs. And it can work across multiple files and self-validate. And finally, it can also interact with GitHub using either the GitHub CLI, as you potentially also use it, or using an MCP. MCP, by the way, sorry if I didn't explain that. MCP is sort of a framework, a tiny framework that the LLM has as a tool, and it can, with that tool, communicate with other programs. So it's sort of a small interface. Whenever the LLM is reading a file from your file system, it also uses a sort of a tool to read it. And this is probably in the end also some sort of an MCP. Probably it's a sort of simplified version of it. But the idea is everything that the LLM can use as an interface to different programs is some sort of an MCP. And what are the benefits of agentic coding? Well, on the traditional side of the AI coding, as we did it like 2 years ago, we had single code suggestions that you would iterate on. in this chat window, for example, they could help you, but context is missing. You have this auto-completion of functions. We know that it can be sort of confusing, a bit distracting, and it takes quite a lot of assistance. So you always, in every step, you sort of have to either copy, explain, and react to the output of the LLM, and then tweak it further and further. And this can be quite time-consuming. On the other hand, if we now talk about the agentic coding, there is more autonomy in the LLM. And the LLM can subdivide its task into problems, into sub-problems that it would then do on its own or tackle on its own. And there is an end-to-end task execution. So there is a prompt in the beginning, a requirement, and then what you get in the end is a product, or let's say a change suggestion. And it does this proactive planning and debugging. Okay, here are some workflows. I don't know how actually these things are. What I could say to these. So there's different tools that you could use to get this agentic coding. One is very popular, the GitHub Copilot, which works fine, just has a limited sort of scope of tool use as I saw it, but it might have changed in the meanwhile. Cloud Code is very strong. You see, I'm a bit nuanced here. Then we have Klein, which is a VS Code extension, which also works fine. It's LLM agnostic, so it could sort of use different LLMs, even open weight LLMs with it. Then we have Cursor, Z Assistant, and Windsurf. Cursor and Windsurf, you have to pay for that. Z Assistant, I think for that you also have to pay on sort of a plan. I mean, we'll talk about the payment later. Z Assistant is also very strong. I think Jonas has experience with it. Would be curious what he says about that. So I would now do a demo, unless you have questions. Then I would show to you, and I didn't prepare for it. I'm a bit stupid. Last time I had this Pipesar example. Perhaps that's still in there somewhere. And I beg for forgiveness, my computer is quite slow today because I had to throttle it a little bit because it was heating up very much. Okay, let's go to the new opt. This one, I think, is damaged. Sorry for being. Now, what I run is a Claude. This is a resume. So the -r option, that's a resume option, and you could resume former chats that you already sort of started. And I'm a bit fast now, perhaps giving a bit more context. There is this Claude Code integration, and Claude Code is a product developed by Anthropic, and you could download it or install it right away in your terminal just using a command, which I can show you later. And then you would have it in your terminal, and you would have the Claude command already there, and you could then run this command, and this would then open this agentic workflow framework. And if I just click this now, it opens sort of, as you might know it, this sort of chat interface-like framework, where you can type in things here and then ask Claude about it. Now this will not.
Sorry,
yeah?
just like a quick question. Are we recording this, or is there a way to record this? Because I feel like it might be like really useful, not only for right now, but for later as well.
I didn't record anything. I don't know if anybody did.
Somebody wrote in the chat something about OBS, so yes.
But we can have another
All right,
run.
great.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't think about it. But perhaps then the audio has to be sufficient. Whenever you have questions, you can always approach me or anybody who also use the tools, and then we can tackle these. Okay, so what you saw now, I just wrote this cryptic thing here. Naturally, this doesn't make sense to any LLM out there, and Claude Code is now trying to understand, okay, what does the user actually want? And it says, okay, I'll help you to understand what's happening with that random text input. Let me create a to-do list to track any tasks that might come from this. So you're seeing there is sort of an intrinsic strategy for Claude Code, which is this to-do list. And whatever you sort of instructing Claude Code to do, it will subdivide this larger task into to-do lists. And sort of this will be its anchor point throughout even a larger complex workflow. So you would, for larger tasks, see this one here being a bit like longer, and it would tick these boxes as soon as one to do is actually done, and then it would move to the next one, so here it doesn't. It had one to do. It doesn't make sense. So it just stopped here. We can close this chat here, and I would now resume the task that I actually showed last time, and I hope I can find it quite quickly. Yeah, that's this one here. So I have asked Claude Code to make a change to a function which is called incidence function. I have to look where it is. Incidence matrix. Incidence matrix. And this incidence matrix is a function defined in the pipes core and the graph.py module. And I said to it, okay, I actually want to apply the same changes as I did for the adjacency matrix some while ago. I want to apply the same changes to the incidence matrix. And these changes are mostly, I don't want to have the return value of the incidence matrix function being a sparse matrix. I want to have a pandas data frame instead. So what I did, and I would just now copy the requirement, or sorry, the prompt that I sent to Claude Code and rerun it. I would open a new chat now. I have copied that one. Claude. I'm open a new Claude chat, and I'm recopying the prompt I did last time. It says, have a look at the incidence matrix function defined in pipes.networks.py. So I'm already giving Claude Code a hint where we want to look. Which function are we talking about? Which file are we talking about? In contrast to the adjacency matrix function, it does not yet support the arguments return data frame and investment period. Also, the internal code relies on numeric indexes instead of index labels as used in the adjacency matrix function. Please refactor and extend the function in order to tackle these points. You see, it's sort of a mixture or a balancing of a prompt of I'm being specific at one hand. I'm saying, okay, this is where I want to go. I want to support these arguments in the end. And there is a function which is similar. I have already replied. So it has an example where it can orient on. But on the other hand, it's still a task for the LLM to resolve, right? So it has to look at the adjacency matrix function. It has to understand the incidence matrix function, and so on. I would write one thing, and which is write tests, write and execute. Sorry, execute Q tests in the test graph script. And now I'm shooting it off. And now what you would be seeing is that Claude is sending this prompt to the server, and now there's a back and forth between the Claude server and my computer. And Claude on its own would now try to understand the code bases here on the left-hand side, go through the files and try to catch the relevant context in order to resolve that task. And what it would normally then do is, again, doing this this to-do list, and then trying to tick the boxes. And I'm just seeing that I forgot doing one feature or showing one feature, which is actually a very nice one, which I would like to show you. And perhaps let's do that. So just imagine this would now continue to work. But there is one crucial thing I want to show you, which is now I'm restarting Claude. I have the prompt in my history, so I could just go upwards, and I have it here again. And actually thinking about code quality and like being sure that Claude does the right thing, the Claude Code framework has one thing which is called the planning mode. And the planning mode is always a thing that you could activate if there is a task that you want to be sure of that this is executed the right way. And I could now activate it here. You see it here. It says plan mode on. With Shift Tab, you do that twice. Then you're in this planning mode. And I'm sorry, I forgot that before. It happened to me the last time as well. But it's always good to, before you actually get the LLM to be changing your code, do the plan first. So really let the LLM come up with a plan, and then you have a review of this plan, what it wants to do in order to get the job done, and then it can sort of execute the changes or incorporate the changes. So I'm running this again now in plan mode.
Just a question for this, just so I understand this correctly.
Yeah.
So this means that if you're not in planning mode, or in plan mode, then Claude is automatically already changing something inside of your code base, or your branch where you're testing this or trying around, and not only proposing the changes in a diff or something.
That's exactly the thing. I mean, this is just how these tools work. They would directly execute the changes. There is some sort of permissions that you have to give to the LLM, and then it would do these execute or these changes just on its own without repetitively asking you whether this now should be changed. So the idea is really you have an intrusive LLM which changes your code. It is hitting on your computer in a sense, but it's also in a good sense because it has sort of the flexibility to do these changes and to get the contexts from different files, and it just makes this whole workflow so much more effective.
Okay.
But the good thing about this planning mode and sort of the separation between planning mode and implementation mode is that the planning mode doesn't touch the code base at all. It doesn't edit anything, and it's very restrictive. So it just hasn't the permissions to do that. And after it has its plan done, you can review and say, okay, this is looking good, or this is not looking good. Change these files, but not these. So you can tweak it sort of at an early stage. So it has a sort of master plan in background when it's doing the execution.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah. So I found these things quite useful. And you're seeing now how Claude is doing things. It takes a while, though. I mean, I didn't expect the plan to be taking longer than 2 minutes, but it just needs that time sometimes. And you would see it where it all looks. So it looks into places where the incidence metrics is actually used in our code bases, where it's what application cases for this function, and then with that it has all the contexts. And this is something very crucial about it. So because whenever you are changing such a function like this incidence function, you could change it in your code, and then you have just another return value. But you would also make sure that wherever you use this function in your code base, this is actually compatible. And Claude Code knows about these things. It knows about sort of the impacts on other modules, and it searches for these impacts and then adjusts them these application cases accordingly. So this takes a while. And I'm sorry, perhaps the last time it was quite fast. It did it within two minutes, and this can vary from time to time. But I think this gives you a hint on how these things are actually working.
Yeah. So Fabian, from my side, so like here you are doing something in Pipesa.
Yeah.
Now, and you've had a conversation with the LLM before, so it knows Pipesa. Do you go, when you're working on Pipesa EUR, do you then go back to this discussion and then continue with Pipesa EUR so that it also has the context of Pipesa?
I wouldn't, because you have to be very concise in the information that you're giving to the LLM. And whenever you're starting a Claude Code context window in one repository, then you want to contextualize it in a very efficient manner. And how I do this now in this case, and it would be working without it, but here I'm having a Claude MD file. And this Claude MD file gives Claude sort of an instruction how to work. And not necessarily how to work, but actually contextualizing it in a sense. What are we dealing here with? What is this code base? Where to search for files? How to execute tests, and so on. And this is very, very, very powerful. And I would always recommend to use it, because it just prompts the LLM much better. And you would have the same Claude MD file, ideally also in the Pipesa EUR repository. And then it sort of is aware of the context. In the meanwhile, it finished the plan, and it's saying, okay, here is the plan to fix the incidence metrics for multi-period networks, and it sort of proposes things. Now, I would be a bit surprised if it doesn't talk about the data frame, but probably that's not so important right now. I just said, okay, now this is the plan. Okay, let's go for it, implement it. But here at this stage, you could always say, okay, now please think about that and that, and then it would sort of you could tweak the plan, and then it would do the execution accordingly. Okay, I think you got an idea about how this thing is running and how it is interacting with you and where the strengths are. So I find this very, very helpful because this can do things that I would perhaps do in an hour, and if I tweak it correctly, this can do it within 15 minutes. But just because there's sometimes so many things you have to think about. As I said, the usages of a modified function in your existing code base, how to do the documentation, the doc strings correctly, and all that stuff. And if you prompt it correctly and you give the instructions correctly, and often it also does it just naturally, then it can be much more efficient than you being on the editing on the code. Yes.
Will it offer you like the structure? So will it say, you know what, to make this code better, we're going to create a new file, a new .py file that contains this additional script, like just in terms of how we structure the code, or does it just kind of use whatever's there and adjust it?
Yes, it would come up with these suggestions. You probably have to ask for that. So to get that answer, you probably need to ask, how can I generally improve my code modularity, for example? And then it would say, okay, we could move this function to a new module called so and so, and it can definitely help you quite heavily with this restructuring of code.
Fabian, are we just watching it? Sorry, yeah. Are we just watching it now, running tests, those tests failing, and then it rewriting the code to make to pass the tests?
That's exactly the case. Mm-hmm. So it defines tests on its own. It executes the tests, seeing whether the tests are passing or not, and then iterating so long, or iterating and finally converging to a stable function definition. And that's sort of the powerful thing. It should, in the end, I don't know about if we have a look at the Git changes. Yeah, it already. I had probably a dirty Git status here. I can remove that, I guess. But in the end, I mean, we instructed it to come up with a new Python with a new PyTest, and this is what you would also see in the end. So there should be a new like a test script, and it should execute it, and the test should run successfully. And this is the real power, right? So you get, as if you sort of prompt it accordingly, you get a feature that is in the code implemented. It is properly tested, and it is documented. It just gives you direct feedback of whether the code is functioning or not, and you could just like verify this by looking at the test.
So Fabian, when you say it tests to see that it compiles and runs, but the output is still questionable. Like, you still have to run it and then test whether, for example, you made the dashboard probably with this here. Would it have run, compiled, and then checked that the IP address that was created works, or where does it kind of stop with its iterative checking?
Yeah, it normally sort of stops when the feature is implemented in the code and the tests are running through. And the tests mean really like unit tests on these functions. It doesn't now open, or wouldn't now open, the dashboard on your computer and have a look through the dashboard, because it can't do it. It can only work with this text files. But it would always see also the output of the PyTest report. And you're now seeing, I think Cloud Code has a bad day today. This took now very, very long, and it's still on the to-do list. Last time I ran it, but it might be that I'm not on a clean status in my repository. But you see, so what it does here now, it modifies the incident metrics function, and if we can go to it, Incidence metrics, and it now just added a new argument called return data frame, as we instructed it to do. And this sort of is inspired by the adjacency matrix, which already has this argument. But what I want to say, it really did what we instructed it to do. Okay, you get the idea. I think I can stop here about talking about the Cloud Code implementation. Just to wrap up, so this is really one tool that leverages these agentic workflows by using your command line and executing tasks and editing your code base. It's very easy to install and extremely powerful, especially when it comes to long workflows and complex tasks. This is where I really saw it working quite stably. Has this built-in planning mode, as we discussed. It's highly customizable with these Claude MD files, and you also can introduce custom commands to it. It has a GitHub bot integration, so a GitHub integration. I think there's no need to talk about that at the moment. But I would really like, if I saw these tools that are available, I found, and I tried it out a lot, I found that Cloud Code is the best one. At the moment, it costs $20 a month for sort of the pro plan. And compared to what you get out of it, this is quite cheap. There is also the max plan for $100, where you get like access to the more mighty LLM, like the Claude Opus model. Yeah, but it's definitely worth it. And I think at OET we are also sort of discussing whether we want to sort of make this available for everyone. But this is still something we need to figure out, I guess. Yeah, I would say try it out. Alternatively, you can also use Copilot, which has also these agentic workflows available by the chat window. It also has a nice integration with VS Code. It really depends on you, what you like. I really found this Cloud Code interactive mode very, very stable, and it's sort of also IDE agnostic. Yeah, takeaways. Try it out. Spend time on contextualizing the LLM and give it general context through these markdown files, for example, about code conventions, but also in your prompt. And let it do the plan before the coding. I found that to be a very good procedure. And in the end, also let it self-validate. And that is through these self-written code unit tests and then execution of the unit test. So it's really these three things. What if you want to go into agentic coding? I would say context, plan before coding, and self-validation. These are the three takeaways.
Is that something that you need to prompt Claude to do self-validation, or is that automatically always?
I would do it. You don't have to prompt it in your terminal. You can just add it to the Claude MD file. So it might be that even here I set it here. I said all new features must have corresponding tests. Use PyTest fixtures for setup and teardown of test data. And probably you should have, or I should have said something like, after an implementation, always run the tests. So then it has this Claude MD file. It has that. Is always aware about these instructions, and then it also follows them.
Yeah, that's super useful. Could you also maybe share that just
sure.
to have a read through?
Sure. Yeah, by the way, you can create these Claude MD files by Claude itself. So if I were to open a new Claude window and I typed init and execute that, it would create a Claude MD file by its own. And before it writes out these sort of conventions and stuff, it really fetches or goes through the code base and looks for file structure, tries to learn about the code conventions, general approaches, documentation, whatever, and then writes it out in the Claude MD file. So this is like a very, very good start for the Claude MD. And then you can tweak it further. Yeah. Any other questions? And perhaps while Luciana or Jonas are here, perhaps you can also share a bit of your experience.
Yeah, so I'm following a very similar workflow, but starting from Z, basically VS Code rewritten or something like that. And they have a sort of Copilot also integrated that uses Claude, Sonnet or Opus. I also found this, you're using Claude.md. This would be used as a context automatically, or there is a more agnostic .rules with the same content that you can add. I think, but I think this is just convention. Probably everything will use everything at some point. What I'm missing there, there is not a very clear plan mode, I think. I'm sometimes then trying by the prompt to first please concisely describe what you intend to do, and don't start writing anything before I haven't approved sort of prompt. That sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. So it's a bit of a loose gun there. What is very nice about how Z does it, you get direct diffs about what it's proposing in the editor. I think this is probably the same with Copilot, and you can then by chunk approve or reject or pointed to, well, that's quite obviously a bad architecturally wise idea. Please do this differently. And then it basically does only changes on that. So I think the iteration, or I like the iteration in the editor, basically. When I tried to do an architectural design, so now for the data catalog, I basically was I'm trying to come up with a couple of models on how to restructure the data in PipesAUR, and I try to build an architecture plan with this. Complete disaster. I didn't have any idea of what I wanted to do, and it completely misunderstood what I wanted to do, and it proposed a lot of code, and I threw everything away a couple of times. It gave me some ideas, which I kept, but most of the things that I kept, I rewrote or wrote completely myself. I actually have now a couple of pen and paper solutions that I like a lot better than what I came up with. But individual things that I forgot, so I basically was able then to ask it later on, might I have forgotten something, or is there any problems that you see? And some of the things it highlights is then, oh yeah, indeed, this might be something relevant that I should look at or think about. So it's sparing partner, that works, but you really have to look through everything it generates, I would say. There's a really bad stuff also coming out sometimes.
And I would suppose as a sparring partner, it's also like super useful that you don't have to feed all the information in the chat interface, but that it's actually with this agentic implementation, you have it already there. It knows about the repo and what you changed and stuff. Yeah. In that context, a follow-up question maybe: do you also use it to review PRs? I know that GitHub Copilot can do this automatically on GitHub, and sometimes it points out quite useful hints. But does this also work with, for example, Claude?
That was this GitHub bot integration that I just touched upon. There is this functionality that one could, probably use. I didn't use it too much. I just tried it out in LinoPy, and it worked fine-ish. But I was not very happy with it because it was quite an extensive review. It sort of covers or tries to cover various aspects of your changes. Including security and general structure, which is probably good, and which is probably also something they have to do because they want to sort of cover a wide range of code implementation tasks. And anyway, for that it felt a bit too clumsy. I think this is something supportive though that we could probably use at some point. I would try to not fall into the trap of being too lazy and just let the LLM do everything and then not reviewing by yourself as well. But anyway, that's probably just a general thing. And I would also be curious about Luciana's experiences, if you could share.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Fabian. Yeah, I've started using it after your presentation like 3 weeks ago. It's been very interesting. The first impression I have, it's like you have someone working for you, which is pretty nice. Someone that you can give orders and then does the work. But of course, it's not just giving order. You also have to supervise, which for me it's been a bit like an interesting experience for learning, especially in the PipeCell world. I mean, many things are new for me because I come from a different background. So yeah, it's a learning while saving a lot of time experience. So that I like very much. And the way of using it, I don't really have anything to add to what Fabian presented. I kind of use it similar way in the way he uses it. By trying to give as much context, having a .md file. I mean, he shared, we work in the same project, so Fabian shared his .md file with me that I could also use, although I had also generated my own, so Claude can also kind of read through all the files to be able to come up with the instructions for himself, which is interesting and nice. So I don't have really anything in terms of tips or anything on how to use it. I'm also still learning about it. Sometimes it can be frustrating because it cannot really do what you're asking for, so you kind of have to come in and ask it differently or search in other. I mean, search in other sources, like go to PipeCell. Read the docs, or you go to Google, right? And there it's going to be easier. So you have to kind of measure how much time you give to Claude to come up with a solution, or maybe you're going to save more time if you just go and search for yourself because he's stuck or something. So yeah, it's not bulletproof, but it saves a lot of time. Yeah, recently, it helped me a lot. Like doing all the plots for the validation of something I was doing, generating the test for something I was doing. So all this work that would take me hours to do, it helped me out. And then I had like something safe to use and to test what I was developing. So for all those additional auxiliary activities. It's also a very good tool to use, but of course always under our supervision because it doesn't have the knowledge or know exactly what needs to be done. So yeah, I'm pretty happy, and yeah, so that's it. Don't have anything else to add, Fabian.
So, Luciana, as a follow-up, so you got the $20, I think it was, subscription
Yes.
then?
Yes,
Okay.
I got, because without that you cannot use the agentic version of it. You have a limited access through the interface in the website, but for the agentic version of it, you need a subscription. Yes, so I got the 20. Only once I hit the maximum in these 2 weeks I've been using it. But it's a maximum that you cannot use it for some hours, and then you can go back using it again later. So yeah, for me it's been enough for everything that I need to do. I use it frequently every day, but not all the time.
One of the things that I found always helpful with ChatGPT is that it would sometimes recommend packages that I was not aware about. So, firstly, does it identify potential packages that are useful? And then, in the case of pandas, I always have this problem where ChatGPT doesn't seem to know that it's changed. The capital H has been deprecated, and now we have small h when you assigning our like resampling data. Does it know the latest version of all the toolboxes you're using, and then does it suggest any other toolboxes?
Question. I'm so about the packages. Definitely does that. It has also quite some knowledge about the variety of libraries out there and the use cases. About the recent version of packages, I think that's a general problem for LLMs. I'm not entirely sure how much up to date. Oh, I think Claude Sonnet, like the new versions, like the 4, should be quite up to date. I don't know when the end of training material is, but it could be end of last year. For this particular case, there is also MCP servers that try to cover that. So whenever there is changes to packages, there is sort of an MCP, it's called context 7, I guess, where the LLM could, for example, now use pandas, and then it checks through this MCP server what are the latest changes within the pandas package. And is any of that change actually applicable to my implementation now? So it sort of double checks its own knowledge with sort of documentation of recent changes in the pandas library, which can be very helpful because it gets sort of information about the latest updates to libraries.
I would guess as well, if it's self-validating and there's deprecation warnings when it's running the tests, it would probably auto-fix those. So long as the library has good deprecation warnings.
Exactly, yeah.
So my last question. Is there anything that we need to change in the way that we write our documentation so that the agentic AI can understand it better for other people to use pipes.eur, for example?
That's a brilliant question, and I honestly don't know. Probably there is a better way so sort of from your coding structure, letting the LLM work better with your code bases, and like giving the exact context that it needs. I don't know what a sort of an AI friendly code base would look like. This is something that we need to explore, but definitely worth probably thinking about that. All right, I think this took longer than expected. So Daniel, it wasn't 40 minutes; it was an hour again. But thanks for your time, guys. And whenever you have questions, let me or us know.
Thank you, Fabian. Super interesting.
You're most welcome. Yeah, okay. All right. And again. Okay. Have a good day, guys.